All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Because today, we're looking at a case that is just absolutely mind-boggling. In the entire history of unsolved mysteries, very few cases are as deeply fascinating and, honestly, as incredibly frustrating as the lead masks case. For nearly 60 years, this puzzle has completely baffled Brazilian investigators and amateur sleuths all over the world. We're talking about a deeply bizarre scenario here, where every single piece of physical evidence seems to actively contradict the one that came right before it. It's this wild mix of the mundane and the downright supernatural, creating a web of questions that just refuses to untangle. By the time we go through all the strange clues left behind on that hillside, you're going to understand exactly why this remains Brazil's greatest and honestly most haunting unsolved mystery.
To really wrap our heads around how strange this is, we kind of have to put ourselves right in the middle of the discovery. The setting here is absolutely crucial. So picture a local teenage boy in August of 1966. He's just out for a routine walk, making his way through the rugged, brush-covered terrain of Vintam Hill. Now, this is an isolated, lonely spot near Rio de Janeiro. Definitely not the kind of place you'd expect to stumble into a nightmare, right? It was a perfectly ordinary day, until he pushed through the vegetation and made a truly chilling discovery. Lying there completely peacefully on the damp hillside were two dead men. At that exact moment, nobody knew who they were. Nobody knew why they'd hiked up into such desolate terrain, and nobody knew who or what they might have been waiting for.
When the authorities finally get up there to investigate, they are met with a scene that makes absolutely zero logical sense. First off, these men weren't dressed for a rugged hike in the brush. They were impeccably dressed in crisp, formal business suits, which were then strangely covered by heavy raincoats. But, okay, here is the most baffling, unsettling detail of the whole thing. Resting securely over both of their eyes were these strange, heavy, homemade lead masks. They were essentially crudely fashioned lead shields designed to just completely block out their vision. And what makes this scene even weirder is what wasn't there. There was absolutely no blood, no injuries, no signs of a struggle, and the surrounding brush was completely undisturbed. The police quickly ruled out a robbery because their wallets and valuables were still right there in their pockets. Nothing was stolen.
So you could imagine the absolute confusion of the local police here. I mean, they are standing on this remote hill looking at two perfectly dressed bodies, no missing money, no violence, and these totally unexplainable homemade lead masks. At first, investigators figured they were just dealing with a strange, localized crime scene. But as they scoured the tall grass directly beside the bodies, they found a single, solitary piece of evidence that changed the whole trajectory of the case. This discovery instantly turned a local oddity into an international mystery. Lying right there in the dirt was a small, seemingly unassuming notebook. When police opened that notebook, they didn't find a diary. They found a highly specific, almost clinical timeline written out, dictating exactly what the men planned to do in their final hours. And it reads like a seriously morbid schedule. Step 1, 16:30, be at the agreed location. Step 2, 18:30, swallow capsules. Step 3 was incredibly brief, just noting, after the effect. Then came Step 4, an instruction to protect metals. And finally, Step 5, wait for the signal. It is incredibly eerie reading these words today, knowing they were the focus of these men right before they died. It's a precise set of instructions for sure, but it opens up an entirely new universe of questions.
The sheer vagueness of these instructions is where the mystery really grabs you. I mean, what exactly were these men supposed to swallow at 6:30 p.m.? And what kind of signal were they anticipating up on that lonely hill? Now, that instruction to protect metals, that seems to be a direct reference to those heavy, uncomfortable, homemade lead masks they were wearing. Think about how suffocating a raw sheet of lead would feel resting directly on your face. How desperate must you be to shield your vision like that? Whatever they were trying to see or whatever they were frantically trying to protect themselves from, we just don't know.
And to make matters infinitely more perplexing, there was a massive missing piece to this puzzle at the scene. The notebook explicitly commanded the men to swallow capsules at exactly 18:30, right? So naturally, investigators assumed they'd find pill casings, maybe a bottle or some sort of container nearby. Well, after a meticulous, exhaustive search of that entire hillside, absolutely no capsules were recovered. Nothing in their raincoat pockets, nothing hidden in their formal suits, and nothing tossed into the surrounding grass. The very items that would almost certainly explain how they died so peacefully were entirely impossibly absent from the scene. Once the police finally identified the victims, this fascinating and super bizarre duality emerged about their lives. By day, these two guys were highly logical, grounded individuals working as electronics technicians. They spent their hours dealing with circuits, wiring, and the very strict rules of hard science. But by night, they harbored intense, hidden interests that totally defied logic.
They were deeply involved in fringe scientific experiments, the supernatural occult, and the pursuit of UFOs. It's this exact jarring clash between irrational electronics and irrational occultism that makes their final moments on that hill so incredibly compelling to look at. When investigators began interviewing people who actually knew the victims, a very strange picture started to emerge. Friends of the men claimed they genuinely, fervently believed they could communicate with unknown forces. Keep in mind, this is 1966 we're talking about. The space race was at its absolute peak, and UFO sightings were a massive cultural touchstone globally. But these guys? They took it a step further. Some acquaintances insisted the men were heading up Vintem Hill expecting a secret, direct contact from extraterrestrials. Others firmly believed they were conducting some sort of dangerous, unregulated scientific experiment, trying to use their technical backgrounds in electronics to bridge the gap between science and the spirit world.
So, as investigators dug deeper into their backgrounds, hoping to find a clear, logical explanation for the deaths, they actually found the exact opposite. The collision of their technical skills with their occult obsessions just left the authorities completely stumped. Were they attempting to protect their eyes from the blinding, radioactive light of a descending spacecraft, or was this just a tragically misguided, unregulated experiment with earthly radiation? Every single piece of background info the police uncovered didn't solve the case. It just spawned 3 new, seemingly impossible questions that totally defied a rational answer.
Over the decades, investigators, historians, and amateur sleuths have essentially narrowed the possibilities down to 4 main theories to try and explain this. First, you have the poisoning theory, which suggests an accidental death caused by whatever mysterious substance was in those missing capsules. Second is the failed ritual theory, the idea that a dangerous spiritual experiment simply went fatally wrong up there. Third, we have the UFO communication theory, which takes their friends' claims at face value and suggests they really were seeking secret contact with unknown entities. And finally, there's the tampered evidence theory, proposing that a third party was on that hill and deliberately removed the real clues before the authorities ever even arrived. But here is the deeply frustrating reality of the lead masks case. Absolutely no single hypothesis neatly ties together all the bizarre evidence. I mean, think about it. If they accidentally poisoned themselves with the capsules, where are the containers? If it was a robbery or a murder disguised as a ritual, why was their money left entirely untouched, and why was there zero sign of a struggle? If they successfully contacted the UFO, well, where is the physical proof? And if someone tampered with the scene, why on earth would they leave that incredibly incriminating notebook behind? To this day, no matter which angle you approach it from, no theory explains every single clue.
So when you step back and look at the entirety of this case in our explainer today, we are left with a truly haunting tableau that feels like it belongs in a sci-fi novel, not a real police file. We've got 2 rational men who walked up a lonely hill and never walked down. 2 strange, heavy homemade lead masks designed to shield their eyes from something unknown. One terrifyingly cryptic note dictating a strict timeline for an event that seemingly cost them their lives. And now, nearly 60 years later, we are literally just left with a mountain of questions and absolutely no definitive answers.
This is one of those rare cases where the physical evidence is as clear as day, yet the ultimate truth remains completely hidden in the dark. I want to leave you with this final thought to ponder long after we wrap up here. Look at all the contradictory evidence, the double lives of the victims, and that incredibly strange timeline. What do you think really happened to those 2 men on Vintem Hill back in August of 1966? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and be sure to stick around for more deep dives into history's greatest, most baffling unsolved mysteries.